markers into history. Yesterday was the 171st anniversary of the Seneca Falls Convention. This proclamation stated, all men and women are created equal. Reinforcing that, but we had already a couple of months ago, under the law's leadership, we had passed equal pay for equal work. So, in our work that we do, I have two overarching issues that you are an intellectual resource to us. And we all like to thank you for getting out the vote and making the calls and doing this and showing up, and you do all of that. But more important than that, you are fresh thinking, fresh eyes, entrepreneurial thinking to help invigorate our agenda. And I thank you for being that intellectual resource because you have helped us put together the agenda. Of course, without you, we would not have known to pass legislation in the early days of this time, the free, fair, and open internet. We passed the Save the Internet Act to restore net neutrality. Expanding freedom and ending discrimination against the LGBTQ community. We passed the Dream and Promise Act. We passed common sense bipartisan gun violence prevention bills to strengthen background checks. And young people have been very much a part of that. Are under threat in 16 elections, somewhat 18. Now they're telling us every day, 24/7, we're still under threat. We passed Save Our Federal Elections Act, and we look forward to working with you to do just that. And to save our planet, another issue that is so prominent for you, to Save Our Planet Survival, we passed Climate Action Act now. As when we ran, our agenda was clearly for the people. Lower health care costs by lowering the cost of prescription drugs and saving the pre-existing condition benefit. Second, lower health care costs, bigger paychecks by building the infrastructure of America in a green way to create good-paying jobs along with the rest of the done. And, very important, lower healthcare costs, bigger paychecks, cleaner government. Our special interest in money. So, to end voter suppression, to pass the Voting Rights Act, all of that are part of that bill that we hope to get passed. And we do believe that one of the voting suppression measures that is out there is the dark money that suffocates the airwaves and just destroys the confidence of the public that their voice and their votes matter. We disagree with that. So when we talk about justice, there are two, there's one overarching initiative we must take. We must do everything in our power in all of our legislative agendas, our grassroots executive interest, to end the cruel and moral disparity of income in America. People have their own future and in our country, and it also undermines our democracy because it shrinks the middle class, and we have to fight that. So all of this legislation falls under an overarching, we have to stop that. And the other overarching issue is to set a plan to have climate action now.
Okay. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today and joining this breakout session, entering public service during a global pandemic. As I'm sure everyone here can imagine, beginning a career in public service is a rewarding but challenging experience. The unprecedented conditions that we're seeing in our hospitals and on our streets present unique challenges as well. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our moderator today, and coincidentally, my boss, Senator J.D. Ford. Representing Senate District 29, Senator Ford is a true trailblazer at the State House. As the first ever openly LGBTQ member of the General Assembly, Senator Ford made history in 2018 when he defeated incumbent Senator Mike Delph. Senator Ford is a tireless advocate of the State House for his constituents, and he proudly represents millennials across the state in the Senate. He's the ranking minority member on the Senate Commerce and Technology Committees, Senate Elections Committee, and the Senate Family and Children Services Committee. I can attest from personal experience that Senator Ford is one of the hardest working senators at the State House, especially when it comes to direct constituent assistance. As his legislative assistant, it's been my pleasure to support his efforts. Without further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to our host for today's panel, State Senator J.D. Ford.
Well, thank you, Ethan. It's truly an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation to moderate this panel. And I really can't do the work that I do at the State House without your help. So thank you very much for always, listening to my crazy ideas and helping to, really get the people of District 29 the help that they need. So thank you. Before I get started, I just want to take a personal point of privilege, if I may, and then we'll introduce the panel. But I really wanted to, as many of you know, Juneteenth was yesterday, and so just really wanted to highlight two people of color in my life who have really made an impact on me this week. Number one, Ladro Zuniga, who had a recent resolution to the State Democratic Party Convention, bringing access to our party. And unfortunately that resolution failed, but he's still out there doing great things. And Ben Yoder, who is a rising star in the Indiana State Teachers Association, who took to Facebook to make a video about asking folks to stop doing battle with Trump folks on Facebook and start getting out there and working for candidates that they believe in. So shout out to those two folks. Again, I'm J.D. Ford, representing District 29 in our state Senate. And now I'd like to have the opportunity to introduce our panel. So folks, I'm gonna start with you, Tai. If you could just give your name, the city that you represent, the district number that you represent, and your pronouns. Mine is he, him, his. We can start with you, Tai, and then I will just go down in an alphabetical listing here. So Ali, you are on deck.
Okay, so good afternoon. Tai Adkins, Councilwoman for the City of Gary Common Council for the 4th District.
Okay, Ali?
I'm Ali Brown, Indianapolis City County Councilor, she, her, hers, District 5.
All right, thank you, Ali. Moving on to Alex.
Good afternoon. Alex Burton, 4th Ward City Council in Evansville, Indiana. And my pronouns are he, him, his.
All right, thank you, Alex. Crista.
Hi, Crista Carlino, City County Council, District 6, west side of Indianapolis. She, her, and hers. And good to see my state senator this morning. Thank you so much, JD.
Yes, and my city county councilor, Crista Carlino. Thank you, Crista. Let's go to Grace.
Hi, Grace Kestler here in Columbus, Indiana, city councilor at large, and pronouns are she, her, and hers as well.
Awesome, thank you. And last but not least, my friend, Keith.
Good afternoon, Senator Ford. Hi, everyone. Keith Potts, he, him, his, and I am the City County Councilor for District 2 in Indianapolis. Happy to be here today.
Great, thank you all so much for those introductions. Just glad for people to kind of see and hear your names. And geographically, we're kind of all over the state of Indiana, which is really awesome. So I figured for this part of our panel, we would just have a conversation and kind of speak directly to our young Democrats for our state. So I'll just give you some questions for you all to think about, and then if it speaks to you, jump in there and then give your answer. So many of you were elected last year in the municipal elections, and so this is starting your first year. And so I guess my first question to you all was, how was entering public service different than your expectations? How was it different than your expectations?
I guess I can, oops, sorry. I can start with that. We had a unique situation in Columbus as well, where our city council meetings were in chambers for the first 2 meetings, and then we moved to an off-site location. And so I was thrown off guard a little bit on that. And then once obviously the pandemic started, we started communicating via WebEx and those type of communications. But I think my expectations were, you know, to build these really great relationships within the city, and you do that, Columbus is pretty small, by seeing people around town, by being in City Hall and bumping into people and having conversations and having the opportunity to really, you know, meet the people you hadn't met. And with kind of the switch in meetings and the pandemic, that hasn't happened the way I was hoping. And so obviously we've been able to have, you know, phone calls and these things, but it's hard to replace that, seeing each other face to face and meeting people and bumping into each other to learn about, you know, the work that's going on and build those relationships. So hopefully, yeah, down the road when we can start doing that again, I really look forward to that.
Thank you, Grace. And can you just tell folks, you represent Columbus. What is Columbus? Well, where is it? And what is it known for?
Yeah, so we are just about 45 minutes south of Indianapolis, just off of 65. If you've ever been to Edinburgh Outlet Malls, we're very close to there. But we are actually known for our architecture. Columbus is a national point on the map for architecture, so we have some quite amazing gyms that when you grow up here like I did, sometimes you glance over them, but once you start to really look into it, it brings quite a few tourists here to our community. And so we're a fairly small community though, just over, relatively speaking, compared to many of you in Indianapolis. We are just over 40,000 in our community as well.
Great, thank you. Allie, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I was going to say, no, I would assume none of us thought there would be a pandemic in our first 100 days in office and everything be crazy. But not only that, it affects the next 3 years of our terms. Here in Indianapolis, a giant chunk of our funding comes from tourism dollars and convention dollars. I'm sorry if you can hear Dill in the background. It all comes from convention and that kind of money, and we're losing all of that. So big plans, grand plans that we had for 2022, 2023 have to be reassessed. So that's been an interesting way to look at it. There was so much promise once we started, and there's still a lot of promise, but they put a lot more, it's put a lot more road bumps into making the big changes that a lot of us were eager to do.
Senator, I could just add to that as well. So just, you know, kind of similar to what Grace and Allie also said, I would say 2 things that have been different than what I expected is the communication with constituents. So in the city of Gary, that was one of the main concerns on the campaign trail that I received from my constituency base. My demographic is largely senior based. And so the seniors wanted to make sure that I, being a young person, didn't forget that their methods of communication is coming to the council meetings, or is having a community meeting in person, or it's receiving a letter in the mail, right? And so with the pandemic, it was how do you maintain the flexibility, but make sure that you don't isolate that large senior demographic base with us moving to like Zoom meetings and moving to more of a virtual space with doing the business of the city. So that was something that was hard. I would say to try to combat that as the trends has started to decline a little bit. Last Friday, I actually did still have an in-person community forum, but we had it outside to ensure that we were practicing social distancing. We did hand out masks to give the seniors comfortability as it relates to that. But a large parts of my communication within the last couple of months has been social media. So that has been a challenge that we still need to work on. And as we open back up, depending on what Governor Holcomb says, to having those in-person meetings, I still have to consider that, because a lot of people, being seniors, may not be comfortable coming, even though the scope has changed. Another part for me that has been different than what I expected is understanding the powers of the council. So understanding the legislative power that we have, and honestly what we can do, and then being able to communicate that to constituents. I did actually thought that there was a lot more flexibility as a member of the council in a district to have say-so as it relates to economic development, redevelopment, et cetera. However, once you get a seat at the table, you understand that you really are limited as a council member. And it's really the executor who has the say-so in his team, or their team, if you will, who has the say-so as it relates to that. So you still want to be a part of the conversation, but you understand the limitations of that. And so it's, okay, how do I establish a partnership with the executive branch to make sure that, you know, the input from my constituency is still given a place at the table when those discussions are had. So those are two different things, the communication aspect and then understanding your true powers as a council member, and what you can do for your community.
And to add on to that, think back, you know, right after the election, Evansville is about 120,000 residents. Ironically, we did not run it in doing so. You know, people around the state were like, wait, that Democrats took 7-2 majority of the city council starting in January. And once that happened, I was unfortunately or unfortunately elected president of city council in my first term. And since then, it's been putting out a whole lot of fires and things that have just been happening. A lot of that prior to COVID was avoidable, but it became this big political circus that's really, it was a lot to take in. And then now, even in the middle of the pandemic, we're having to really have some hard conversations and figure out what the city of Evansville is going to do. We have a casino here that's been shut down, and that was $1 million worth of revenue for our city every month. So now we know that we're going to be impacted for the next 2 to 3, maybe even 5 years. So now I've really taken the stance of, listen, we know that our revenue is going to be down. What can we do to really increase our revenue streams and make sure that we come out in a better situation on the other side of COVID?
Yeah, anyone else want to tackle that question? Okay, well, thank you very much. And, you know, back to your point, Tai, about, you know, communicating to your constituents, you know, the COVID situation clearly has made all of us have to do that more. And so you're kind of right in the sense that the show must go on, that we still got to, you know, use all of our platforms to get out there and communicate with our constituents. So your point is well taken. Thank you to all the panelists for that first question. My next question to you is, I'm just kind of wondering, you know, was it easy transitioning to being a candidate to now actually governing? You know, I think for me, when I first got there, it's like, you know, you're going full speed ahead, 100 miles per hour, you get elected, and then it's like, oh, now I have to actually do stuff and submit bills. And, you know, so I'm kind of curious to see from you all, if you all had that same experience, and, you know, what was it like transitioning from candidate to an elected official?
I'll hop in.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I know one of the biggest things, and it sort of goes along with the first question you were asking about sort of public service being different from your expectations. And I think it's different from public expectations too, in that what sort of like Tai was mentioning, the authority within the role, what a role's purview is. And specifically in talking about that transition, it's when you're a candidate, you're talking about all the issues you're really passionate about, and you kind of think, well, once I'm in the role, then it's a lot more straightforward. There are a lot more practices and patterns and templates in order to get those things done. And what you quickly realize is those don't exist. And truly, everybody entering into public service is on their own at the very beginning. It's about building relationships. It's about making connections. It's about finding ways to collaborate with folks who you might only agree with on one or two things. But if you can agree with them on those one or two things, that's where you can make progress on those one or two things. And I think because we are so used to thinking of campaign life additionally as super partisan, then when we're on the public service side of things, we do have to collaborate, we do have to work together. But I think overall that transition into this role, especially given all the challenges we face, it was especially unique for those of us entering public service this year for the first time.
Great, thank you, Keith. Anybody else want to tackle about transitioning from candidate to elected official?
I'll give a perspective, Senator.
Sure.
So I think being in a Democratic stronghold up north in Northwest Indiana might be a little bit different from the rest of you all. With that being said, once I won the primary, I knew that I was a shoo-in for the general election. So in terms of preparing for it, I started preparing, I took like a month or two off. So I would say like late July, early August, we were preparing a strategy to start tackling for January. It wasn't still focused on the actual election that would take place for the general election. So I kind of had that little bit of advantage with working with some of my mentors who are currently elected officials who are more senior to understand how to use that time. My corporate experience probably was a hindrance as well. It was good and bad. So using the corporate experience with my real job, you know, I had a project plan for the parks that I wanted to implement. I had like a year one priorities, you know, I had objectives. We did a logo for my district, all of this like, you know, marketing stuff. We were ready to go. But then once you hit January 1, you realize that you don't move the same way in a municipal government that you do in a corporate setting. You know, that is not the way execution works. You don't get the buy-in either. You don't get the buy-in from your council partners and the executive branch the same way that I would move in a corporate environment. So that was a little bit different. I think, you know, it was easy because the way that I structured my thoughts was well received, but my execution of being direct and expressing, it's a new, you know, radical candor and being very candid with things. That's not the way that you build partnerships in a political environment, right? And especially from a municipal standpoint, locally. It's more so about working on building a relationship first, seeing how you can both help each other, and then figuring out how do we move and transition together. So once I got in the seat, I had to realize that. But in terms of developing a plan for execution, you know, I was able to use those last 5 months of the year to kind of do that for the transition into the role.
Hey guys, I kind of had some different experiences. I'm actually in the car right now. I am a teacher full time. And so after the election in November, you know, I was working all the way up until the week before Christmas. And then, of course, wanted to hit the ground running in January. I know, as Ali said, my colleague, Ali Brown, that we got hit with a pandemic 90 days in or so. And communication became critical, just as Senator Ford stated. I haven't felt like I could step away. And sort of my husband and I forced each other this weekend to just, you know, unplug and stay away. But obviously I'm not doing the best job right now connecting with my fellow young Dems. But I think that's really critical and important when my constituents needed me to communicate critical services for, you know, paycheck protection loans, or, you know, getting PPE for their small businesses as we were reopening, understanding when we were going through times in civil unrest. You know, Marion County is different than surrounding counties here in central Indiana, from everything from COVID to even, you know, we were under curfew recently, as many of you know, and just communicating things that were changing daily. Sometimes the media would find things out, honestly, before city councilors knew what was happening from our executive branch in government. And so I think that I thought things would be much slower, like watching paint dry, right? It's that municipal government bureaucracy, but there was this rapid response to just, communicate with constituents about all the services, the things they should be doing, how we needed to, sort of stay at home, to stay healthy. There was a lot of moving parts happening. And so, but for my health, I would say we had to just take a step away, because there's constantly something that you can be communicating, letting people know. But every week I've just committed to doing a digital newsletter, because I can't go to neighborhood meetings that have been canceled, to larger group community gatherings. They just aren't happening. And so I didn't really think that we would be so separated from our constituency. So that's been definitely a hurdle in transitioning.
And Krista, to go on top of that real quick, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like there's no blueprint to respond to COVID, right? We all are now just kind of in this space where we have to create it. And that's really what's been the most interesting thing for me. And my predecessor joked with me last week. She's like, you've experienced things in your first 6 months that a lot of people don't experience in their full term as a member of council. So she was like, take it a gift and a blessing. And then, she threw in, well, we have the right person for the job, just because there's so many moving parts, trying to make sure that everybody's in contact with, working with my colleagues, working with the mayor's office, working with county government. Everybody plays a vital role, and it's important that we all, are on the same page.
Yeah, thank you, Alex and Krista, for your thoughts. Anybody else want to jump in there? Okay, let's move on to the next one. This is a question that I get asked a lot, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. But I serve in the Senate, obviously, and I'm the youngest member of the Senate. And I get the question a lot of, how has your age been either an asset or a detriment? I sometimes get the sense that some of my older colleagues, just kind of want to pat me on the head and send me away. But, I feel like because I do my research and I ask good questions, and I have the District 29 folks behind me, that I'm there for a reason. They elected me for a reason. They want me to use my voice. So I'm curious to hear from you all. Have you experienced something like that? Or just in general, how has your age been either an asset or a detriment to your public service?
I'll say for Evansville, majority of our council members were born after 1980. So 4 of us Democrats and 1 Republican. So that's been just a cultural shift. And what I've enjoyed most about it is we all see things we see things alike in a lot of ways and have the same thought process when it comes to solving problems. So it's been interesting, to say the least.
Good.
Yeah, we added, I think it was 11 total new counselors in Indianapolis to the council. Not all of us won new seats for the council, but some people replaced people who had left. And it's out of 25 counselors, 11 of us are new. So that's been interesting. And I think there's 6 of us, Keith, Krista, that are would qualify as young Dems, and then there's 2 that would qualify as young Republicans. So there's a lot of a younger voice on our council. We have an older council just because and I think a lot of people tend to be older when they run for council because you need to have some kind of established life, it feels like, to be able to do this job, because we get paid $11,000 a year as Indianapolis counselors, and it is nearly a full-time job. So you have to have a way to be able to afford it. And I think having us on the council has really changed the way that the council and the administration and everybody is looking at our leadership, how they look at who should be able to run for office and what kind of barriers we're putting in place. It's hard to advocate for more funding for yourself, but when you're talking about the fact that I could easily spend $11,000 a year on the child care that it requires for me to be able to do this job, you start talking about that kind of stuff. So that's been a big change. Plus, I think we're bringing some really new, fresh ideas to this, and not just super progressive ideas, which I think we're bringing, but new approaches, how to talk to people, how to reach out to people, helping our older counselors with getting on board with continuous social media and having them reach out. I think that's been a big change for us on our council. So I think it's an asset, and I say that I feel like I'm the oldest of the young counselors. I have less than a year left as a young Democrat, so I don't feel young, but we definitely lowered the average age on the Indianapolis Council by quite a bit.
I think, if it's okay, in Geary, it is the old guard. So in the past, there has been a couple of occurrences, like U.S. House Representative Reagan Hatcher, State Representative Reagan Hackert, she actually was younger when she was on the council, but she was by herself. And we've had, that happened in the past, but this has been the first time where there has been a majority new council. I think six of us out of the 9 is new. And out of that 6, 2 of us are young. So myself and in my first district colleague, his name is Councilman William Godwin, we are younger and active as well, which is different. And so that has pushed our older colleagues to kind of want to work harder as well. So from what I've been told in the past, when they've had these younger people, their first year as freshmen on the council, they usually just kind of sit back and just learn the process. Well, William and I did not. We actually have been learning, having rewards as well as making mistakes as we go. So we came in, writing ordinances. We came in sponsoring things. We came in doing resolution immediately. And so that is different. So I would say the feedback that we've got from some of our senior members has been that, like, wow, you all are pushing us to think differently. Wow, you all are different, because he and I get together and, co-sponsor an ordinance in a minute. And they're like, we haven't even did anything in the last, 2 years on the council. So our more senior people, I have one person that's on the council, has been there for 22 years. And then we have another gentleman who is in his 80s again. And then this probably is like his 4th time that he's been on the council. And so we learn from them, but it's vice versa as well this go round. So that has been a great experience. They do let us know and keep us in our places being young people. They use certain terms. I am a lot of times sweetheart and dear in meetings. And so I will encourage the attendees who are listening to that, who get in position, make sure that you hold your respect. Even though you are a young person, you have the exact same power as your colleagues who are older, and make sure that's cute. You be respectful, but you make sure that you manage how you want to be addressed, because that can be a term of, like a pat on the back or trying to keep you in your place, and you don't want that to be something that's a constant, right? And so that has happened to me a couple of times in meetings as well. But I have no problem with being direct and making sure that we recorrect when needed.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to speak to that?
Just one quick thought to that. I know one thing that we've found in Indianapolis, especially with a lot of our younger and newer counselors, is that some of us are coming almost directly from sort of like the community organizing side of things. I know Councilor Brown and I have both done a lot of community organizing work leading up to our entrance into public service on the official side of things. And so that has allowed us to maintain these lines of communication through the protests that we're seeing, that Councilor Brown and I are going to, and with Councilor Carlino. So much of our Indy Council is regularly attending these protests and demonstrations. But it's also allowed us to have a more direct line going from the grassroots to the institutions, that allows that messaging to facilitate that much faster and that much more efficiently.
Great. Okay. Let's shift some gears here. I see that we have a question from Dylan McHenry, and he writes, what accomplishments or actions are you most proud of?
Senator Ford, if I may.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
And this might strike a chord with you a little bit, but one thing that I'm really proud of is communicating with all my constituents. I'm really proud of, my ability to reach across the aisle, not only in the chamber, but with constituents. I won by 191 votes and flipped a district that was held by a veteran Republican female. And it was very apparent that many constituents were sort of locked out from her communication. I have an open sign-up form if you want to connect with my weekly newsletters, but that's something that even as a constituent, I would repeatedly ask to be added to my previous councilwoman's newsletters and would never get that option. And I learned very quickly that wasn't just me. And so I'm just really glad to be able to be a servant for all my constituents and not just those who elected me.
So one thing that I've been really proud of, and there was a lot of stuff happening before COVID and it's kind of slowed down, and kind of piggybacking and adding Crista to this, is out of the 25 counselors, 6 of them are women. All 6 of us are moms. So we started focusing on issues that affect moms, affects parenting. One of the things that I did that didn't require resolutions or legislation, it just required having somebody in the room, was every public restroom that the city of Indianapolis operates in the next budget, the money will be there for a changing table to be in every one of those bathrooms. We have 25 floors in the city county building. There's 1 bathroom with a changing table in it for the entire city county building. All those employees, it's on the 16th floor in the women's restroom. Zach, my husband, has gone in to try and had to try to change Dill and had no option to do that. So that's just one of those kinds of things that bring in new voices, bring in younger voices, bring in people who see something different. You can just make a change just by being there. So we're going to see changing tables in public parks and in any of those city county operated spaces. Also being able to talk about childcare and the importance of having childcare available to our city employees, to the people of Indianapolis, to people who are coming in who have to go through court, talking about the fact that there's no public space or safe space for women to breastfeed or pump inside of our city county building. And you could be called at any moment, and breastfeeding is not an excuse to get out of jury duty. So what are you supposed to do when you're there for 8 hours? So, you know, bringing up those kind of things, bringing that outside perspective, I think has been something I'm really proud of. And we're going to keep pushing on this. We're going to keep moving forward. We're slightly hampered at the moment about a lot of things, but, you know, that doesn't mean we're going to stop pushing them.
Yeah, to pivot from Allie's point, not to talk about bathrooms too much, but we have quite a few accessibility issues in our city facilities, and I personally use a wheelchair, and so actually our city restrooms in the city hall were not up to code for accessibility standards, and so like I personally couldn't use the restroom in the city hall. And so this was discussed and obviously brought up like, hey, you're not following code and you're breaking the rules. And of course, you know, it always comes down to budget, or we're working on that, and things get pushed off or they find ways around it. But not until I officially joined council, I think they were like, maybe we should fix this so we don't get a bad, you know, review in the paper. And so they kind of fast-tracked a restroom project that actually has a changing table and room for breastfeeding as well, because they didn't have that either. And so I think I'm proud of just being able to be a, you know, different voice on the council. This wasn't something I did other than make a few calls, and, you know, whether it's just, you know, the beauty of being on the council, and maybe people take us seriously more now that we have some control over budgets, but I'm excited to be able to show people just a different vision for, you know, how we do our work and how we communicate with our constituents, and making sure that it, you know, it is accessible and our meetings are, you know, in buildings that people can reach. And because a large, you know, 20% of our population are either have disabilities or are affected by a family member or someone who does. And so I'm proud of that and excited to, I guess, continue that work.
Good deal. Thank you. How about, yeah, go ahead.
I think the proudest moment for me, during this time is really just being able to be a problem solver with the focus on just city ordinance and policies that are so outdated. And I got to give a shout out to the ND City County Council, simply because you all have been really setting, as a whole, you all have been really setting a framework that I've been able to follow as it relates to renters' rights, through that right now. The latest resolution that you all passed as it relates to we are going to follow suit on that on Monday, and really having those tough conversations to make sure that every resident in our city really feels protected is our city's ambition statement. And so that is very much where my focus is as it relates to making sure the residents of Evansville, educating them about the policy process as well. So, yeah.
Good deal. Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in there? Proudest accomplishments?
Maybe we all should go. We all probably have accomplishments.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'll go. So far, my proudest accomplishment has been the creation and approval of Resolution 2020-01 for the City of Gary, which was a resolution where in my district, we established a motto, a vision, and a mission, as well as a logo to accompany that in terms of what we want our district to be, how the people of the district feel. And it really was to instill pride back into the city. It's no secret, I'm from Gary, Indiana, and the reputation that people might know about Gary, it kind of still as a dark cloud around the city. The people of the city is what made me want to run. I actually was not living at home. I was living in New York. I moved back home a couple of years ago, decided to stay back home to actually make a change and get uplifted and try to do some improvements. So one of the things, just the model, for an example, the model, which was done as a collective with the members of the community, we actually voted on this and talked about what the makeup of the community was. So our motto was completed to be a turn towards tomorrow. So one of the things that I felt as someone coming back to the city, we lacked progression. And one of the reasons why we lacked progression is because when you talk to individuals in our leadership, a lot of the times in the past, they stick to the past. So it was always, well, in previous administrations this happened, or this council person never did this in the past, and this. So we have to look towards tomorrow. We have to focus on the now and how do we create a plan that will help us progress. And so, collectively we voted on that, and we were able to get that constructed in the form of a resolution to make it stick within the district. It was interesting because you would think something such as that created pride, that helped to influence a sense of community, which aided to the fact that we wanted to improve a sense of livability within our community, be well supported throughout the city, and it wasn't. It actually was met with opposition. It was an article about it, which was crazy. Our administration, which is the mayor and his team, did not want to support it initially because he felt that it was something that was going to separate the city, which is totally not true. It actually encouraged our other council members to get involved within their community and their constituents to understand what their constituents want the makeup and the brand of their particular districts to be. And so now the 6 of them are actually working on that, to create something similar. So it's my proudest accomplishment. One of the comments that we got in the committee meetings, which is where the work of the council really happens, was that, oh, well, this never has been done before. Well, just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean that it's not right, and doesn't mean that it shouldn't have been done, right? And so again, because of that, that was the anchor that was launched. And now everyone within the community, we have shirts, we have branding for each neighborhood within the district. And so that kind of relaunched hope within my district and within the city of Gary as well.
And I'd love to join this questions conversation. Something that Tai just said really resonated with me, and it relates to the second half of Dylan's question, where he said, what misconceptions did you have about the job before you started? I know we kind of talked a little bit about that earlier, but I think one thing that Tai just said, saying that it's really difficult being the first to do something, I think that's something that we're seeing. We certainly hope that when we advocate for our values during our campaign season, that we will unapologetically advocate with that same intensity, determination, and focus once we're in public service. And what I have learned is that for a lot of folks in public service, nobody on this call, I'm so fortunate to serve with all of you. But for some folks, it takes having more of a public consensus before something can move forward. Some folks don't want to be the first one to do something, but the urgency of this moment, whether we're talking about the coronavirus, whether we're talking about an economic recession with massive unemployment, whether we're talking about a crisis in our democracy where lines to vote are hours long. Marion County only has 22 vote centers for a primary election. We're limited on how we can send in mail-in ballots. And above and more important than all of that is the civil unrest that is so justified in protesting the 400 years of from slavery through the systemic racism that still pervades our systems to this day. The urgency of the moment requires us to be the first to do something. And if we're consistently waiting for somebody else to be the first to do it, we just fall further and further back in that line that's marching toward progress. I know every single person on this call, and I know many of my colleagues in Indianapolis would agree that for us to truly meet this moment, it requires us to be the first to do something.
Yes, Keith Potts.
Great,
Take notes from that.
Yes. Thank you all for that. I appreciate that. We have about 9 minutes left, and so I just wanted to kind of return to the title of the panel, Leadership in Pandemic. And I'm really baffled, and I'll explain why. So when I go out to do my errands and go to the grocery store, I'm wearing a mask, right? Because we know that you're wearing the mask to protect others from you. And so I'm just, we got the White House did their daily press briefing, and the press secretary said she's not going to wear her mask today at their rally. And so I've seen this politicization of wearing a mask. And so I'm just curious to hear your thoughts as to what you all think about that.
Yeah, this question's interesting. And someone, it was a Republican, mentioned it to me. He said, hey, everybody that wears a mask is a Democrat, and everybody that doesn't wear a mask is a Republican. And I was like, what? And he was like, no, think about it. Next time you go out, there's an older gentleman. So he had his mask on. He's like, this is crazy. He was like, this is how bad, the current political climate is. If you wear a mask, you're for one side, and if you don't wear a mask, you're for the other side. And I really looked at it, and I was like, this speaks to the divide we really have. That something so factual as COVID has become politicized, and it's really only harming our residents, whether you're wearing a mask or not. And then to go on from that, just the access to COVID testing here down in Evansville has been awful, and the people that need it the most have not had access to them.
I'd love to jump in on this one because then unfortunately I have to hop off early. I'm helping on one of the next training sessions that's coming up. But with regard to this question about wearing masks, I think it speaks to a broader issue. When the debate over wearing masks, it's not a debate over whether it's effective. It's a debate on whether an individual wants to listen to scientists and doctors. It's not a debate whether systemic racism exists. It's whether white public officials are willing to hand over the mic to people who have had those experiences to talk about what the policy solutions to them are. No one has a monopoly on good answers or good ideas, but listening to the experts of their respective fields and listening to people who have the experience to speak to particular policies, I think is something that I love seeing young elected officials being unafraid to do, unafraid to say, that's not my area of expertise. I'm going to talk to the person who it is their area of expertise, or it is something that they have experience with. And so with masks, for crying out loud, I'm sure everybody on this call already does wear them, but just wear the mask. just wear the mask. If you have glasses like me, they fog up sometimes. If you have the wire, bend the wire around the bridge of your nose, or just put a little piece of tissue paper under a cloth mask. It stops the fogging up. You'll be fine. I've got to hop off. This was great. Thank you so much, Senator Ford, and all of you all. This is a great conversation. Take care, everyone.
My biggest thing is I don't know how to explain to people that they have to care about their neighbor. And that's what masks are about. I don't wear a mask for me. I wear a mask for you. And that's what I tell people. It's about taking care of people. That's why you wear a mask. And this is a struggle, and it's a struggle on almost any topic that requires equity and justice. It is how do you explain to people that they need to care about others, that they need to feel for others, that they need to understand where others are coming from. If this is turned into a political statement, I fear for the state of Oklahoma today about what's going to happen with with everything, with the rally for Trump, because they're not going to wear a mask because he's making it political. The thing is, we have to do our best to care about others. We have to do our best to explain why we're doing it. But if people aren't going to wear masks and that's their freedom, well, it's our freedom to also go, you know what, that's fine. We just won't interact with you. You know, that's not like a constituent thing, but in general, like if I go to Menards requires masks. That to me is a safer place to go. If a store requires a mask, I feel much more comfortable going in there. Now, when they're talking about places making masks optional because they don't want to politicize it, I'm not going to a movie theater that doesn't require masks because I'm not going to sit in a place for 2 hours. I don't know how to explain to people that they have to care about other people. And that's just something you kind of have to, and that's something we all do. I mean, I'll gladly tell you, proudly tell you I'm a bleeding heart liberal. I care a lot, and I know everyone else does on this call. I don't know how to explain it to people who don't. So I just choose, for the safety of myself and my family, that you have to step back and say, I just won't go there. I just won't do that. And hopefully people get that message.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else want to just quickly, we're about 3 minutes left. We're kind of winding down our time here. Anybody else want to jump in about the masks? If not, I do have a lightning round question to ask all of you. Can you give me a thumbs up if you're good for it? All right, awesome. Lightning round question. Joe Biden is our president. He's taken office. What is one thing that you want to see him do on day one? Just one thing. And I'll just kind of go down the line here. So I'll start with Tai.
Student loan forgiveness.
Okay. Allie.
I don't know. Just reverse everything that Trump has done. I don't know. There's so much. Sorry.
That's okay. Alex.
Put everything that was stripped away from Obamacare back into action.
Okay, thank you. Krista? Is Krista still with us? No? Okay. Grace, what's the one thing that you would like to see President Biden do on day one?
Yep, I agree with what everyone said. Fix our trust and integrity that we have, which obviously won't happen immediately. But yeah, coming out of the gate with some clear policies, or just being a nice guy might be a nice thing. Nicer guy.
Yeah, I agree with all that. It is about 1:28, and I really want to say thank you to the panelists for today's conversation. Tai and Allie and Alex and Krista and Grace and Keith. It's always my pleasure to spend some time with you, and I know that you all are doing amazing things in your respective cities. And certainly, if there's anything I can ever do to help boost up your work that you're doing, just please let me know. So it's been my pleasure to spend this afternoon with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. So good to see you all.
Yeah.
Joining us today.